Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Colchester Borough Council Cabinet meeting on Wednesday, the 17th of November, 2020. Announcements, and then we'll proceed with the meeting. Firstly, action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, but if an alarm sounds, at the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and will also be available to listen to or view afterwards. I want to confirm that all of us present in the room are adhering to the relevant government guidance on COVID-19. I can assure those watching that the meeting room is set up to meet social distancing requirements. Whilst we are not wearing masks while seated, these will be worn if and when we leave our seats. A COVID risk assessment has been undertaken for this meeting. The use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, by visitors is welcomed, but you are requested to use them discreetly, to set them to silent, and to not use the voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times. And I'll just introduce a little bit of the work of the Cabinet. For the benefit of members of the public, I would like to explain that the Cabinet is the main executive body of the Council. It is responsible for day-to-day decision-making on all Council services and also makes recommendations to full Council on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet is made up of 6 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. My name is Councillor Paul Dundas. I'm the leader of the Council and portfolio holder for strategy. What I will do is I will ask councillors going around the room in that way to introduce themselves. Councillor Lissimore.
Good evening. I am Councillor Sue Lissimore and I'm Deputy Leader of Colchester Borough Council and Cabinet Member for Resources.
Good evening, everyone. I am Darius Laws and I'm the portfolio holder for the Economy, Business and Heritage.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Simon Crowe and I'm a Cabinet Member for Environment and Sustainability.
Good evening, Beverley Oxford, portfolio holder for Communities.
Adrian Pritchard, Chief Executive.
Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer.
Richard Clifford, Lead Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. You haven't retired yet, Adrian. I do have some late apologies from Councillor Ellis. I understand his wife has undergone a procedure this afternoon. She's fine, but has had an anaesthetic and therefore can't be left, and he's the only one there. So as there isn't actually anything particularly under his portfolio, I think that's the sensible thing to do. With that done, we will move on to the agenda. Item 2 is urgent items. Have we any urgent items?
There are no urgent items, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Councillors, do we have any? Councillor Lissimore, you're indicating.
Thank you. I would like to announce a non-pecuniary interest as Chair of the North Essex Parking Partnership with regards to item 9.1. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we make sure that's noted? Anybody else? I see nobody indicating, in which case I will move on to item 4, which is minutes of previous meeting. Councillors, we're asked to confirm that the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of October 2021 are a correct record. Are we in agreement on those? We are. Thank you very much. With that done, we'll move on to item 5, which is have your say. We have no public speakers that I'm aware of this evening. But we do have 4 councillors, the first of which is Councillor Martin Goss, who is joining us remotely. Councillor Goss.
Good evening, Cabinet, and thanks for your time this evening. Quite a lot to get through, so I'll get cracking, but I hope you have a good meeting. Firstly, just to say that we absolutely will be supporting Councillor John Jowers for Deputy Mayor. So I think absolutely he's the next longest serving councillor, very well respected. So absolutely we wish John all the best with that in his next role next year. The second thing I wanted to bring up, Kirby Drive allotments. Kirby Drive is a newish road in Mile End, and off it are around 45 allotments. Since June this year, the council has owned these allotments, but they've been overgrown and they've been closed. And I keep being given opening dates for them, and those dates keep being missed, and residents are expecting to take them over. This is the absolute perfect time for residents to start growing vegetables and flowers and whatever else for next year, and they're still closed, and we've missed yet another deadline. So I'd like to know when these are actually going to open. What you're also doing is missing revenue from the council income at a time when you need it. I know it's not huge, but every penny does count. I have been asking at senior level, I've even been up to the chief exec about these, because I'm deeply concerned that they're not being used and they're still closed 5-6 months on since the council actually adopted them. Third thing relates to the bin policy. I do support the bin policy now. It's actually had inserted into it that councillors will be consulted prior to any bins being taken. But there has been an issue where a number of bins have been taken away where I believe most councillors have not been consulted. There's some may have been, but certainly the ones I've spoken to haven't. So as I understand it, bins have been removed from New Kiln Road, 2 on Ipswich Road by the car dealership, 1 on Barrack Street, 1 on Ipswich Road outside the Londis, 2 on Layer Road have gone, Parsons Heath by Welshwood Park, Alexandra Road, although that was taken away at the request of the night shelter, some in West Burgolt, and then I believe there was 1 in Stanway, but Councillor Scott Boutell is aware of that. What concerned me is the councillors didn't know these bins had been taken away, particularly in St John's. And obviously that's contrary to the policy, although I do respect the policy is not actually adopted. So it looks like we may have gone ahead with the policy of removing bins, but actually we haven't actually adopted the policy. So I just wanted to raise that as a concern and just make sure that we do get bins put back in those areas, because we shouldn't be removing bins in some parts of the town. There are not enough bins. And then the final question is around the high street. We spent £120,000 of Colchester's money, along with £120,000 of Essex's money, and we had a year's guarantee on that pavement in the high street. It's all been lifted, it's all been relaid, it's all been regrouted. But I was walking down there today when in the area, and there are definitely issues where grout is missing a year on. And we're supposed to have had remedial works done on the whole high street where all missing grout will be replaced, because otherwise we've wasted nearly £250,000 where the pavement will simply start to lift again and we'll be back to where we were, where paving slabs are tripping people up and causing injury. And we can't have that. So if we could please raise that. I have raised it with the portfolio holder at Essex. He's excellent, I have to say. He does come back and he's promised to look at it. But from a Colchester perspective, we should be pushing this. I have been, because of the investment we made of £120,000 of our own money in Colchester. But thank you, and I do hope you have a good evening.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. I don't know if you heard the bell, but I cut you a bit of slack there.
Thank you, you're very kind.
That was fair enough. There are a number of questions there. Would anybody like to come back on them at the moment? I think the Chief Executive has volunteered first.
Chair, I think it's appropriate that I do at least respond to Councillor Goss on Kirby Road, the allotments, which I have to say is more of an operational issue. It may well not have made it to the portfolio holder's agenda. I have to be honest with you and say he's quite right. We have looked to try and bring those allotments back into operation quickly. And to be perfectly honest, I have to say that we have had to prioritise and reprioritise our priorities as such. We have a number of staff who have been suffering from COVID and sickness absence. He is quite right. We did give him a date. We did not hit that deadline due to operational problems. All I can say is we know that it's on our agenda. We are very clear that we need to bring those back into operation. And as quickly as we can, and I have corresponded with Councillor Goss on this, as quickly as we can, we will do so. I'm sorry, it's just a fact of significant demand of tasks on our staff at the moment. And I will certainly apologise for that, but I'm afraid we are not in a position to bring in lots and lots of agency staff and the like because of our financial position. I hope that explains the Kirby Road allotments. We will look to do it as quickly as we possibly can, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Elsie, the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Leader. Following on from what the Chief Executive has just said, I'd just like to point one particular issue that Councillor Goss mentioned. The date of adoption of the allotments was actually the 14th of September this year. It was not June. I think it's important that you're aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Oxford.
Yeah, I think I've got two of these, one of which is the bins. This is one of the reasons why we're having a bin policy, to ensure that all councillors are consulted before bins are moved, removed, and the reasons why. I do know why the Barrack Street one was removed, was because it was a subject of continual fly tipping. Once the bin was removed, the fly tipping stopped. The councillors asked me to get the bin put back, which I did, and the fly tipping came straight back. Now, I don't know if that is the same with any of the other roads, because I couldn't write them all down, but I know that that one is. But this is why we've got a bin policy, to make sure bins are where they should be, where they're being used properly and efficiently. So that's what this policy will do. And I have ensured that all ward councillors and parish councillors and residents will be consulted on what happens to a bin, should it need to be removed, the reasons why, etc. With the pavement, as far as I know, this is a contractual issue between Essex County Council and the contractors that they used, because they didn't do the job they were supposed to do. So I think this is more a county council issue with their contractors rather than it is with us. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Yeah, that's very helpful and informative. Does anybody else wish to comment on this? No, I don't think so. Well, I will just add, as I'd like to thank Councillor Goss for his support of Councillor John Jowers as nomination for Deputy Mayor. I think I'm right in saying, I think he's done 24 years, something like that, maybe more, but he's by far and away the most senior councillor, and I do thank him for his support. Moving on, we have Councillor Lee Scordist, whose contribution is going to be read by the Democratic Services Officer, I understand.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Scordist has written in with just one question as follows. With fly tipping becoming a rising issue in some wards, would we be able to look at increasing the frequency of the freighter service and also consult with councillors about more potential sites? And that's the end of the question.
Thank you. I think Councillor Crowe is probably the right person to go to for this one.
Thank you. It's interesting timing that Councillor Scordis has raised this, and I would thank him for pre-notifying me of his question. I have already actually asked officers to consider options and implications associated with extending the freighter service. I'm due to discuss this in more detail at my next portfolio holder meeting next week, and any option that arises needs to be considered in terms of community, environmental and cost implications. And once I've received information from officers, I'll be able to make more informed choices. And I must admit, I do wonder about this link between fly tipping and the freighter service. I think it's quite dubious. I think the people who are going to go out fly tipping are going to do it regardless of whether the freighter service is increased and there's more frequency. So, but anyway, we shall see what happens in my talks with officers.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I think that's everything on that item. And our next councillor is Councillor Marty Warnes, who is here in person.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, other Cabinet members. Mine's a simple question to the portfolio holder for resources. Could I remind her that both myself and Councillor Pearson are still to receive the detailed written responses promised to our questions made in the October full council meeting, and could she tell us when we are likely to receive a reply?
Is that something you'd like to come in?
Could I just confirm, please, was that with regard to the council tax support scheme?
Councillor Pearson made a question related to council tax support scheme. I made a question relating to the potential need to amend the risk register in order to accommodate the potential strain upon the take-up of the projected local council tax scheme, which the medium-term financial plan was forecasting little over 3% a year.
Thank you. Only because I just signed off a response to you either yesterday or today, can't quite remember, but I will make sure I will chase that with officers, and I apologise for the delay that it's taken to come through to you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Yeah, if perhaps I could ask, because I think this came up with a couple of questions at scrutiny as well, if we could just check that anything outstanding from the last full council has been covered off. So democratic services.
We'll certainly check the one to Councillor Pearson, which I understand that has been sent, but I will check that.
Good, thank you, because it is important that we get answers out there when promised, and if they're not delivered on time, you know, I can only apologise, because it's something I take very seriously, we all take very seriously. Our next speaker on the general Have Your Say is Councillor Lewis Barber. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet. I have 3 issues I wish to raise with you this evening. The first being related to Boxted Bridge. I was pleased that the Cabinet member at Highways agreed to my request to delay putting in a planning application to Essex County Council's Planning Committee. I do have a slight preference in that it comes to Colchester Borough Council's Planning Committee, but that's aside, that will be a decision for Essex. Nevertheless, I would encourage the Borough Council to make a representation when that planning application goes into Essex's Planning Committee to examine the drawings and the impact that has on the heritage of the area of outstanding natural beauty. So I make that request that the relevant officers do put in a consultation response when it comes to the planning process and the planning consultation. My second request is a funding request, I am afraid, and that is following my request at last Cabinet that you consider making an allocation of resources to a design feasibility study for the cycle link between Boxted, Langham and Northern Gateway / Mile End. And the reasons I've come back this evening to ask is because at the next local highway panel meeting, we'll be considering funding recommendations. And I'd very much like to be able to go to the local highways panel and say Colchester are prepared to make a financial contribution to that scheme. I know you've been positive about that in the past, but any concrete words you can give certainly would assist me in getting the remainder of the funds from highways. So I would welcome any further positive comments that you can make this evening on that. My final issue I wanted to raise is related to the spiking of drinks, which has obviously been a very substantial issue, both locally and nationally recently, a very troubling issue. And I was pleased when I've corresponded with Councillor Oxford in the Cabinet on this matter, that the Safer Colchester Partnership are releasing funds to assist in tackling this issue. I know also from Essex County Council perspective that there has been dialogue with the Safer Partnerships across the county, which is excellent as well and most welcome. But it is a really troubling issue. It's a very dangerous issue. It's really quite sickening. And any updates you could give in the public arena on that to help reassure people that about the nighttime economy and going out and enjoying Colchester, I think would be really welcome because I think it's an issue we really need to make sure we get on top of and do as much as we can at a local level. I know it is a national issue as well, but whatever we can do extra at a local level, I'm sure would be welcome by everyone who is invested in the nighttime economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, do I have anybody who would like to come? Councillor Oxford, you're first.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Scores. With regard to the spiking of drinks.
Barber, my word, Barber. As much as I like Councillor Scores.
My ears are playing up, and I think people are who are they aren't, or aren't who they are, whichever. Sorry about that. With regard to spiking of drinks, this is an absolutely disgraceful act. And I know everybody in the town centre takes this extremely seriously. But it is a very difficult thing. Nightclubs and venues are now doing searches. The door staff are now doing searches. They are being educated in people that may have been spiked. not to just think that, oh, well, they're falling down drunk, aren't they? To actually go into it a little bit more. Obviously, the venues don't want this sort of things to happen in their clubs because basically it's not good for business. So they're doing everything they can. They're supplying water, so then people can have a bit of a break. In some venues, any drinks that are left unattended, they are automatically tipped away. So nobody can get hold of them again. But I agree with you, it is absolutely dreadful thing. And everybody is concerned and doing everything they possibly can to stop this disgraceful act. Why anybody would think that's a thing to do, I haven't got a clue, but we're doing everything we can, and it is at top of, I should think, nearly every agenda of the town action plan and pub watch and local nighttime economy. It is at the top of their agenda, and they are keeping an eye on it as much as they possibly can. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who we got? Councillor Laws, I think it's first.
Just to add to what Councillor Oxford said and to reassure you, Councillor Barber, it is obviously a despicable, vile, disgusting criminal act. The proven numbers of it are low, but that's not to say that it's not a problem, because frankly, one case of spiking is one case too many. This council is taking it incredibly seriously. We've teamed up with friends in Chelmsford to harness economies of scale in the procurement of some specialist support to deliver an actual communications plan to help educate the nighttime economy users. The reality is that you have a new cohort every year, don't you, of 18-year-olds, and so it's a constant catch up to ensure that everyone is aware of the potential risks that are out there. This is something that gets a lot of press for being only impacting on females. That's not the case. Males can be impacted too. The campaign that we're going to be working on is not just about drink spiking. It's going to be about looking after yourself in the town centre in general. It's about making sure people know to take sensible precautions like inform a friend where you're going. Consider pre-booking a taxi, particularly on a Friday and Saturday night at peak times when we know it's busy, and consider the weather conditions when you're coming out and about as well, and what you might want to wear because of that. All the wider picture. We want people to enjoy the nighttime economy. We have a very, very responsive licensed trade who are working with us, who care. I'm confident that together the partnership approach we've got is going to prevail. There is a perception out there that the nighttime economy perhaps is not as safe as it is. I think with this campaign, we're going to make sure that people can feel confident that they can have a good night out in Colchester and do it in a safe fashion.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you. I wanted to speak on this, and I want to speak as a councillor in Castle Ward, which is where an awful lot of these incidents are reported to have taken place, and speak as a cabinet member, and speak as a father who 5 years ago, my eldest daughter was in town one Saturday night, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from a stranger who had got my number from her phone and was tending to her. And I had to get dressed and rush into town. And I found my daughter lying on the pavement on the high street with this very kind girl looking after her. And it was explained to me by this girl and the door staff of the venue she was near that they believe she'd been spiked. And it's quite horrific that anyone would do that to another human being, to actually slip something in their drink, or this latest thing we read about of injecting people. It's absolutely beyond the pale. And as Councillor Barber mentioned in a conversation we had at the weekend, it's premeditated. The people who are doing this, they're buying these drugs. They're buying it before they go out. Okay, maybe some do buy some off a stranger somewhere, but someone is buying that stuff. And it's a premeditated crime, which I personally think should be treated as attempted murder. But certainly having had it happen in my own family, the thought of it fills me with absolute cold fury at these deplorable people who commit this absolutely barbaric act. And I certainly will be supporting any actions taken by my cabinet colleagues and the police to see if we can stamp this out and get on top of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add to that, on the media campaign being planned, I actually had a meeting this morning on it. It is a joint campaign. It's not just us. It will be other authorities involved as well. There may be some individual branding on there, so we may have Colchester on the Colchester one and Braintree or Chelmsford on other ones. But we did make the point quite strongly that time is of an essence because Christmas season is approaching very, very rapidly. So we want to get this done and out there at the very latest sort of beginning of December. Obviously, we are working with others, so we haven't got total control over the timing and everything, but that's certainly our view. And I know our officers and particularly our comms team are pushing and working very, very hard to achieve that. On the other two things you mentioned, Boxford Bridge, I think perhaps if I could ask to if Democratic Services can make sure that comment is passed to Councillor Ellis, because I think that probably comes under his portfolio. I see no reason why we can't comment on it. And obviously, as individual councillors, be us county or borough or both, that doesn't preclude us commenting as individual councillors either. On the cycle lane, I'll have to defer probably to somebody else on it because I'm not sure where the funding on that actually lies, because it's quite a complicated relationship between us and county in terms of who's got the money and who can put it in. But perhaps I can tell, it probably comes under a combination, well, it's probably Councillor Lismore and Councillor Crowe, depending on which hat they're wearing. Perhaps I can task them with investigating. Is that fair? Councillor Lismore.
Thank you. Yes, I'm probably wearing two hats as Deputy Cabinet Member for Highways and also Chairman of the local Highways panel. So perhaps it could be noted, please, and declare an interest as the Chairman of the LHP. But yes, if officers could ensure all this is noted and we can investigate that before the next LHP meeting, that would certainly help. So thank you, Councillor.
Makes me a very happy councillor, that does, councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scordis. Oh, Barbara. Separated at birth. As far as I'm aware from the list I have, that concludes the general have your say. I believe so, yes. So we'll move on to item 6, which is decisions reviewed by the scrutiny panel. Do we have any?
There are none, Chairman.
There are none. Okay. Item 7 then is a strategy. The first item of which, or the only item under this portfolio, is 7I, establishment of a joint committee for a tendering Colchester Borders garden community. Cabinet will consider a report on the establishment of a joint committee made up of members of Colchester Borough Council, Tendring District Council and Essex County Council in respect of the tendering Colchester Borders garden community. I think I was, rather than introduce the item then have the speakers, I think a lot of people are quite familiar with this. I think I would suggest that we've got 4 councillors wishing to speak on it. Perhaps we'll let them speak and then we'll go through the issues raised afterwards when I introduce the details of the item, if that sounds sensible. So the first councillor is Councillor Marty Warnes. Councillor Warnes, you're very welcome again.
Thank you, Chair. My colleague Julie Young has just asked me to make sure that she's on the list of speakers. Please, can you confirm that?
She's not on the list of speakers, but
would you like to add her?
I see. Oh, well, she's on the list of speakers on the next item, but she's not on this one. But I have no particular issue adding her, so she's now on the list of speakers.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah. Okay. Cabinet members, I'm here to voice my concerns about the conjoining of the executive and planning role to the same members of what will be the same committee, which is the joint committee between Colchester and Tendring. The current status quo is that the executive powers invested in this council are invested in the cabinet, and they are kept separated from the quasi-judicial powers of the planning committee members. My concern is that with this proposal, we are asking the same members that make the executive and strategic planning decisions to take off one hat and to don another in deciding upon development control matters. It may be that you as cabinet members feel that the development plan document and precedents set by other authorities such as the Broads Authority, where these roles are conjoined, may well allay my concerns. But I felt strongly enough to want to come along and to voice my concern about what I see as a breach of a pillar of our established political constitutional setup. I would prefer a situation whereby the membership of a joint committee changes according to the competences that it is deciding upon. For example, when development control matters are being discussed and decided upon, the membership of that committee is made up from each of the authorities' planning committees. There are established precedents where that goes on, the biggest one being the Council of Ministers within the European Union. There are also wider concerns about giving away the powers that we currently have in deciding upon development issues within our own boundaries to a wider body where basically opinions and even votes of democratically elected councillors accountable solely to Colchester residents can be voted. Whereas currently, if a planning application affecting the garden communities falls within the borough boundaries, then this council's planning committee will decide, and tendering would remain a statutory consultee. So that brings the decision making on the principle of subsidiarity down to the lowest level, which would be the borough that has the legal authority over the planning consent. I appreciate all of the reasoning and mitigations that have been outlined within the report, but I felt strongly enough to want to come and bring these matters to your attention in the hope that they would get a proper debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warnes. I'll probably pick up most of that at the end, but obviously I do understand the concerns around the executive and the quasi-judicial nature of a planning committee. I do get your point. What I would just say is obviously about the control over development in Colchester. We have to bear in mind that probably around 90% of the planning will be in tendering. It's possible 100% of the planning will be in tendering. So in actual fact, tendering is actually giving up a great deal of influence to us, whereas we're not actually giving up very much to tendering. So we have to think about that ratio and really whether we want to have any say through a planning committee over a large amount of building, which is going to affect Colchester significantly, because tendering could basically say, no, we want it to go through our planning committee. And that is where the vast, and possibly all of the TCBGC planning is going to lie. Moving on, our next speaker is Councillor Gerard Oxford.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to speak on this one very briefly to say that this joint project that's being considered by yourselves this evening and then ultimately by full council is for this joint committee of Essex County Council tendering district council and us. My view is pretty simple, is that it's much better to have a seat at the table than not, because you can't influence anything by not being at the table. And I just wanted to make that point. Apart from that, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Contributions like that are fantastic. Good, short, concise. Thank you. And yeah, I'd probably agree with the sentiments. Our next contributor is Councillor Mark Corey, who has a statement to be read by the Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Corey's comment is as follows. It was clear to me from the old councillor briefing that we had that wider representation is sought on the proposed future joint committee. 5 members from each authority would allow greater diversity of contribution and more democratic input. The Essex County Council membership of the committee, if widened to 5, could include local division members. For example, I currently represent Witham St Andrew Division and could represent local interests. I welcome the leader having ongoing conversations with Essex County Council and Tendring District Council, and I offer my support in any discussions to bring about greater participation for local members.
Thank you. Yes, I have had ongoing discussions with Councillor Corey, which have been very positive. I think I don't actually disagree with him. I think I took the message from the member briefing. However, we do have to consider that we can't just write it on our own. We are 1/3 of this. So it is a case of negotiation with our partners because their views might be different. I think Councillor Barber has indicated, I mean, you're not on the list, Councillor Barber. I think, can I do it in order, current order, and I'll jot you on at the end. Councillor Gocher is next on the list.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to formally raise the concerns that I raised in the briefing about this matter. My concern is the fact that the Borough Council, Colchester Borough Council, is seceding power to 3 at the moment, 3 representatives who will be on this joint committee to work on the development plan. And my concern echoes what Councillor Corey has said about the breadth of representation that would represent in terms of Colchester having a say over the development that is in Colchester Borough. Because, of course, there'll be 3 councils involved in this: the Essex County Council, Tendring Council, Colchester Council. They are all run by the same political party. In any case, even if that changed, it would mean that Essex County Council and Tendring Council would have more on the committee jointly than Colchester. It will just be 1/3. So we are seceding influence over what goes on within our borough for a theoretical greater say over the whole development in tendering, the big chunk there. But the problem I have is that it represents only a very narrow political spectrum of elected representatives in Colchester and indeed across the whole area. Is there any update on the breadth and the numbers that will be on this committee, or is it still 3 per council? And is there any way that we can increase the breadth of political representation and therefore input into the development plan of the range of representatives that are on our council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. I'll just pick up on a couple of things. We spoke about this at your member briefing, and the question is, how do you do it? You know, how on any committee do you manage to do that? I think I'm right in saying, just to correct you, I think tendering is a coalition, actually, of quite a few, I think a number of parties. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's probably more than 2. 7 parties. So it's, I mean, if any probably, if any authority would demand wider political representation, it's probably tendering, actually. As I said, I think I worked out to get the political balance across all three authorities, we need a committee of 85 people or something like that. I did it on the back of an envelope, you know, so I get your point. It is very difficult. In terms of ceding power, how much power are we actually ceding? Because I've seen if you look at the map, as I was just saying earlier, it's quite possible there won't be any development in Colchester. So actually, I think the authority which would probably, I would say, why on earth are we doing this, isn't us. I think we'll probably be tendering. And this is the debate, because if we push too hard at some point, they might turn around and say that. So I'm not convinced actually we're giving away our negotiating tactics, but this is a bad thing to say in public. But I don't know if we have a particularly strong hand in this, to be perfectly honest. I'm continuing to talk to our partners in this. We have a steering group meeting tomorrow, at which the subject will no doubt come up. I think, although I had detected perhaps a willingness to talk, I feel that the other two authorities are quite determined to maintain the proposed structure. But we shall see. We continue to talk, and I'll continue to try. Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor J. Young.
Good evening, Leader and Cabinet. I would like the Cabinet to note specifically the map that you have in your papers, which shows the development site. On that map, you can clearly see the proximity of the development site and the housing that exists around the curtilage that is going to be most affected. That is the Greenstead ward. It's closer to houses in Wivenhoe, Elmstead and Ardley. The Labour group have always played a very straight bat on garden communities, maybe to our cost. But you can see that the ward is going to be most affected, is the most deprived ward in the borough, being Greenstead. My residents will therefore expect their representatives to be at the heart of the development proposals and plans, which will affect them more than anyone else. I therefore appeal to you to ensure the voice of Greenstead is heard by including a councillor from this ward as one of the three being proposed. The Gladman site off Bromley Road, 145 houses, one on appeal, sits within the tendering district, but those most affected are in Colchester, and I really do not want to see a repeat of that with 9,000 houses coming forward. I've listened to what you've said in terms of the development site and where the houses sit. But if you look at the plan, the houses that will be most affected are located in Greenstead. I also share Councillor Martin Warren's concerns about the giving away of power. As others have said, we can be outvoted easily by Essex County Council and tendering District Council. There's only 3 coming from Colchester, and there'll be 6 on the other side, if you like. And I don't really want Greenstead residents to lose out here. So I appeal to you to include a Greenstead councillor in the 3.
Thank you. Yeah, I do take your point. I should add that there are borough councillors from other wards who claim that they are more relevant than to this. I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm just saying that they do say so. I mean, what I would say is whatever happens in terms of any final agreement with tendering in Essex over this, I would hope that within Colchester we can have a sensible conversation about representation, and indeed perhaps including county, with a county representative as well, that gets some representation along the lines which you're suggesting, because I do take the point, and I think I am in agreement on it. So I would hope that we can work something out, whatever happens. Thank you. And we have a last minute late addition we have, which I've cut a bit of slack on this, but Councillor Lewis-Barber to contribute.
Thank you, Leader, for that indulgence. Largely, I wanted to make comments following the member briefing, which I thought was quite productive, and the comments I made there just to put into the public realm as well, largely because I do think whenever setting up any changes to our constitutional arrangement at any level of government, that is, it is vitally important that the structures we put in place are not just to the benefit of the existing administrations, but also make sure that they're safeguarded for all members going forward. And one thing I think was particularly important and reassuring was that ultimately control is with full council, and full council grants such power and full council can take it away. And ultimately, I think that's a really important basis of it, because it's important that every member has a say on how the council is governed. So these arrangements, at any point, we could pull out of them if we were so minded that we didn't want to pursue them. And I think that's really important, because it's all well and good while we're in charge, having power and responsibility, but we want to make sure that the rights of those who don't are safeguarded as well when making decisions on behalf of our community. So I think it's a really important principle. And I was reassured in the member briefing on that aspect of it. The only other point I do want to make, because I can see this conversation, well, it's going to last for years, isn't it? So I just find it bewildering, and it's kind of interesting quirk of politics, isn't it? That for the last few years, I sat in this, well, not continuously, obviously, but I sat in this room at various intervals, debating the local plan and being told that all will be well, just vote it through, Garland community principles are great. And so many members, including myself, explained how difficult Garland communities would be. I'd been attempted to be strong-armed by the administration at the time into voting for hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayer money to go to a development company that's now collapsed, because it was the right thing to do, because we were working with our neighbours. And I'm just bewildered and interested to understand how those same members now felt that a garden community could be delivered in the practicalities. Loads of us warned in our group and elsewhere, including Councillor Gocher, for example, has been very consistent on the matter, warned that the practicalities of this were completely devoid from the theory. And we're seeing what is going to be a small piece of a very challenging number of years about how our relationship is governed over this garden community. It's a really difficult practical issue to overcome, as you've said, about representation, all the minutiae. This is a really complex project. And I feel that some members are only quite now grasping that so willfully pushed this project through over the last few years. We know it's complex. So many of us said it was complex, but I really think there's a duty on members now to understand how complex this is going to be across the whole chamber to deliver, because it's vast from every step of the way. People have really got to get up to scratch on this. They hadn't during the actual plan making process, and a number of us made that clear at the time. And now they've really got to grasp, if we're delivering a garden community, and we were told one of the merits of that is working cross-border, how do we think that's going to work unless there's a bit of compromise between the authorities? I find it quite bewildering. I still have deep reservations of the project. I don't think it will ever be delivered in the same way that it's envisaged. But ultimately, there are practical steps now that it's happening that need to be thought through very seriously. And I find it quite bewildering that same members who said, oh, will be great infrastructure, garden communities, wonderful, are now sitting there concerned about how the practicalities are on the ground. So I'd urge all members to make sure they understand the process fully going forward. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Lots of comments there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not to go over all of history. I've expressed my views on this project and the difficulties and challenges I think it presents on many occasions over some time. I find it, the irony is not lost on me that as somebody who spent a great deal of time pointing out why I thought it was more likely not to work than work, but it's fallen to me to try and oversee setting up the committee and getting it underway. But I think, as I said back at the full council where we adopted the section 1 of the local plan, which I abstained on at the time, I have to accept the inspector's decision, and I have to accept that probably whatever we do in some shape, form or another, development will happen there, be it via the local plan, be it via an organised garden community, albeit via a developer just putting in planning permission and winning it on appeal. So I do think it's the responsibility of all of us to accept reality and just try and make it the best we can. I'm not sure it's going to deliver everything which it was set out to, but I think we just have to do our very, very best to make it as good as we can. That's probably really my
Yeah,
my
no,
take
no,
on
it's,
it.
it's all good, leader. I'm going to bid you adieu now and head off. So thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Having said that, I wasn't going to talk too much about it until we'd had all the contributions. I've massively failed in that and have done so. So I will just go through the paper a little bit. As I mentioned, to give a bit of background to this, as I mentioned when Councillor Vaughan spoke, if you do look at the map in the Cabinet agenda papers, there is the little bottom left corner, which is in Colchester. On all the possible master planning I've seen, at least half of that is going to be the buffer zone. So it won't have anything in it, okay? So the most, in terms of planning, which will come without a joint committee before Colchester, is the tiny little slither on the right-hand side of that. Realistically, if you look at the way it's going to be built out, where the road is and where the potential centre of the community is, I actually suspect in the next plan period, there will be no planning applications coming towards Colchester for tendering Colchester borders, because it's on the outer edge of it. Okay, it's not going to start at the edge, it's going to start near the road by the roundabouts. I'm sure let's be honest, that's where it's going to happen. So I suspect there probably won't be anything if we don't have a joint committee. Colchester's planning committee will have zero say over this community in terms of planning applications during the plan period, so for the next 15 years. So in other words, probably beyond the time at which any of us, most of us will be councillors. Some of us might still be about, but probably not. So we've got to think, so I don't know why we're worried about our planning committee losing power, because I think for the next 15, 20 years, I don't think it's got anything to do. I may be wrong, I may be misreading it completely, but I can't actually see what planning applications it's going to be bringing forward. I suppose there's a different debate slightly over the DPD. I do get that, but it's a joint DPD, so let's not think we can just do what we want with it, write it all, and that's what's going to happen, because it isn't. That isn't going to happen. It's always going to be joint, because the whole project is joint. And as I said earlier, I still think of all the three authorities, we're probably in the weakest position, because most of it is not in Colchester, but it affects Colchester. And I think we need to think, this thing's going to be going in 2040. It's going to be going in 2045, okay? So will the councillors of 2045 look back at the councillors of 2021 and say, it might have been imperfect, but were they right to say, no, we don't have a joint committee, we're going to leave it all to tendering and let it all happen there, and basically not have the seat at the table? Or will they think that we were right to have had the seat at that table for the last 20, 25 years? My feeling is that if we don't even have a seat at the table and choose not to, I think they might look back at us and think, what a bunch of idiots, frankly, even if it's imperfect. And I do think, and I do accept that the setup is imperfect, but it will never be perfect for Colchester, because we are compromising with three other authorities. It's not perfect for them either. They're not very keen on some aspects of it. Essex County Council, under pressure from us, have moved on what planning responsibilities they put into it. They put everything in. Tendering didn't want a revolving chair, and I don't blame them. They've given a revolving chair. So once in every 3 years, there will be a Colchester councillor chairing that committee. I'm quite surprised they did that. I don't think I would have done it if I was them. So my feeling is, on balance, we should recommend this to full council, but I don't think this has to be, I think this has to be an evolving thing. I don't think we have to say that this is what we're going to do and it's going to stay like this for the next 20 years, because times will change and things will change and people will change. So what I'm going to suggest is that as a cabinet, and other cabinet members may wish to come in and dissent at this point, and you're welcome to, we agree to adopt the item as proposed, but we do add a quote stating that as with any new governance arrangements, including any new governance arrangements, including the terms of reference, they can be reviewed over time. I will continue to talk to tendering. I will continue to talk to Essex. This can be changed on the night of full council if we make any progress in changing anything. We have a meeting tomorrow at which there will be representatives from Colchester in multi-party. We will test the water and see how people feel. So if I just go to the recommended decision to get the wording right. The recommended decision, I won't read it all out because I think that might keep us here all night, but it's on page 20 of your agenda pack, councillors. And we will make the recommendation to full council as listed, but with the additional comment as I just stated. I don't know, do you want me to read it again or did you get it? You got it? I will read it again. Chairman, please. I've got many pieces of paper. So it's as written, but we note that as with any new governance arrangements, including the terms of reference, they can be reviewed over time. Councillors, are we agreed on that? We are. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your contributions, councillors. It's been an interesting discussion. We'll continue to talk. I am actually in regular contact with group leaders. I have been this morning, and I will continue to do so up to full council on December the 2nd. Thank you. So if we move on to the agenda, item 8, which is resources, and item 8.1 is Estate Regeneration Fund, for which we have 2 councillors speaking, the first of which is Councillor J. Young. Councillor Young.
Thank you very much, Leader. While 6 million from the town deal and 2 million from the Estate Regeneration Fund are a cause for celebration, that celebration will be short-lived if the heart of Greenstead is ripped out in favour of simply more housing. Greenstead at one time was the biggest housing estate in Europe. What Greenstead needs is good quality community facilities, healthcare, space to connect with each other, mental health facilities and jobs. My support for this project will be dependent on this project being done with the community and not to the community. A co-design must meet the aspirations of local people, and I appeal to you as leader to ensure that that happens.
Thank you. I would agree with that. I mean, I know we've had meetings, the early meetings of the board, and I think we've both expressed a few things which were said and happened, that we felt that the project and some of the decisions taken were running ahead of the consultation with the community. I am acutely aware of some of the issues which people are worried about in Greenstead. And I would wholeheartedly agree that it will not work if we do not take people and the community with us. And I can assure you, if I think or see that it's running ahead of where it should be, I will have no hesitation in using any power I have to make sure it's brought back in line with consulting the community. Thank you. Is that right, Sue? Okay. And we also have, to be read by the Democratic Services Officer, Councillor Mark Corey, a statement.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Councillor Corey's statement. I welcome investment into Greenstead via the Towns Fund and the LGA Estate Regeneration Fund. However, I do implore the Council to speak to residents before the plans are seen as a done deal. As a representative of Greenstead via the County Council, I do hear residents questioning what the plans are for Greenstead and how it will affect them. Further consultation is needed with residents and council colleagues about what residents want to gain out of this needed investment. The two sources of external investment combined with council funds are a positive step and something I welcomed formally as leader and would still welcome today. But councils on all sides understand the importance of buy-in from residents on large strategic projects like these. I welcome further opportunities to work with the council to engage and consult with residents. How and when will residents get to see initial plans and have a chance to comment? Please keep us updated.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd agree with most of that, or probably all of it, actually. I think they're fair comments, and I think they're similar to the ones Councillor J. Young made, and I would probably give a similar answer. I think it's something we need to be acutely aware of. I have to confess, I've been a little bit rude because I should have actually asked Councillor Lismore to introduce the item first. So would you like to introduce the item, Councillor Lismore?
That's absolutely fine. You're the boss. You go first. It would just be a very brief outline anyway. I wanted to particularly thank officers for the work that they've done on this. And I also wanted to thank the government as well for giving us the money. Thank you. We will use this very, very carefully. I can only concur with Councillor Dundas when he has said about working with the community. I always say I'm a resident that happens to be a councillor, and I will never ever forget the place that residents have within any project. And we will do our absolute best to ensure that residents are at the centre of this from the beginning right through its development until right till the end. Just wanted to say that, as I say, it's obviously a major regeneration scheme. It's huge for Greenstead. We want to get it right. We want to get it absolutely right. And, you know, Colchester was only one of a handful of towns that were successful. I've sat in cabinet as a visiting councillor and has bemoaned on some of the bids that we have made in the past where we have not been successful. So I really, really want to thank officers for what they have done here, because they have made an incredibly successful bid, and we will use this money very, very carefully. So subject to the discussion under the confidential part of this meeting, which we will have later on, I will be asking the Cabinet to approve this recommendation in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lismore. Yes, I don't think anybody would be hugely surprised when I say that, you know, I'm very pleased to see a Conservative government investing in Colchester and Grinstead. But I would like to really echo the comments about the work of our officers on this. I think we were actually caught on the hop in a pleasant way on this. We put in the bid, but I don't think we really expected the announcement to come out quite so quickly in the budget. I think it's testament to their work and the quality of the bid they put in, because we wouldn't have got it otherwise. So I'd really like to thank them and thank the government for noticing Colchester. That's always good news. So I don't think we actually required a decision is required at this point on this item. Is that right? We just note it because we've considered the report. Thank you. Moving on.
Chair, sorry, there are some specific decisions for you to take at page, sorry, I can't see the page 44 of the report.
I have to bring my laptop back to life first because it's, beg your pardon. See, this is where paperless agendas fall down because they're not used to, they don't work with laptops timing
If
out.
I can add in, well, it's recommended that the Cabinet notes the term of the Estate Regeneration Fund and the scope for this funding opportunity to accelerate and enhance our proposed regeneration scheme for the heart of Greenstead within the Town Deal programme. It notes the progress made towards developing the vision and business case for the Heart of Greenstead scheme. It notes the intended purposes of deploying the further £2.3 million grant awarded as outlined in the confidential appendix to the public report, and it agrees to delegate authority to the portfolio holder for resources to award key contracts for the transfer of assets.
Very well read, thank you. So, Cabinet members, that's what we're deciding. Are we in favour of that? We are, agreed. Okay, thank you very much. So we will move on to item 8.2. Would you like to introduce the item first, Councillor Lismore, or shall we go to the four councillors? Shall we? We'll go to visiting councillors. Our first contributor on this item is Councillor Dave Harris. Councillor Harris, good evening.
Good evening, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet, and good evening, everybody in the room and in the wider community. I hope you can hear me okay.
We can.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to refer very briefly and draw out a couple of items on 8.2, and that's the fees and charges agenda item tonight. With the backdrop, of course, Leader, as you will have read today and seen today in the news, that the cost of living is the worst it's been for 10 years. But it's right and proper that we review fees and charges every year, as we have to, and this is no different to any other year. But with that backdrop, I note, first of all, that the residents that I spoke to about the fly tipping and littering fines being increased found a lot of support in my community, Leader, and a lot of people that I spoke to seemed very keen to support you in that and increase the fines for this type of unsocial activity. On the back of that, here's a negative. I'm a positive on a positive. I'll then go into a negative. The cemetery burials and cremations fees going up. I'm a bit concerned about, because just to let you know that a neighbour of mine and a friend, I officiated his funeral last year. I will call him by the first letter of his surname, which is Mr. K. He lost his wife a few years previously, and all of his life savings, which is very small, very meagre, paid for her funeral. And then he lived on with his disabled son for some years, and then he died last year, sadly, and I officiated that funeral. I saw the anguish and the trouble and tribulations that family had to come together to try and pay for his last wishes at his funeral, etc. And I think the 10.5% increase in the cost of cremations and the rise in burials is perhaps a step too far. That's way above the inflation rate. I know we're in a financial state. I understand that, but I think that bearing in mind that that people's death is very important to families to celebrate people's lives and to look after their loved ones in their after their final hours have passed. I think this ought to be reconsidered, Leader, and I do believe that Mr. K's family and I would appeal that to you for rethink on that figure, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I think Councillor Lismore is going to listen to everybody's contributions and then come back at the end with an answer, if that's okay. Next, I have Councillor King with a statement to be read by the Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Councillor King's statement. My apologies, I am unable to attend tonight, but noting the significant fees and charges changes tabled tonight, ask for 3 clarifications of Cabinet's position on our income budget gap and so-called levelling up. Can the portfolio holder say whether or not, 1, she or officers on her behalf have asked for government support for lost income as a result of the pandemic to be extended, mindful of significant continuing losses? 2, she supports the government's levelling up funding transfer, funding priority for areas other than Colchester, mindful of own areas of deprivation, whether by changes to business rate retention, fair funding formula, and or reduced new homes bonus. And 3, whether she would consult with residents on a proposed cremation charge increases. That's the end of the statement. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, as I say, we'll take the ball. I will just comment myself briefly that I can assure Councillor King, I never miss any opportunity to speak to or lobby anybody and anyone for any funding support for anything, anywhere. Next, we have Councillor Mike Lilly. Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet. I'm here tonight to talk about this Council's decision to put a death tax on people dying and funerals. This is one tax too many. People now are really struggling, or they will be struggling the next few months. Rising energy costs, rising food costs, food shortages, everything will go. They've just gone through the COVID situation. People have lost jobs, they've lost money, everything. And you want to impose a death tax further on people who can least afford to pay it. When someone dies, it is the most sensitive, terrible thing to go through, to lose a loved one. When you meet with the burial director, you then work out what funeral you want to give your loved one. And we all know that we want to give that person a send-off that they'll be remembered by. Favourite songs, hymns, poems, speeches, videos now, everything. But instead, they'll be sitting there thinking, what can I afford? This is just another rise that they have to put up with. Can I afford to really to give my loved one that funeral? And you add an extra cost to those families. So I implore you all tonight, if you make one decision here, and that's to scrap this death tax, you can go further. You could put an extra 10p on parking. You could make those people who pollute the atmosphere, who lead to diseases and the air quality. Why not target those instead of people who have died? They're the ones. 10p on an extra parking rate across the board would help forego the cost of those funerals that you are targeting. So please, I implore you all tonight, forget your councillors, forget that you are family members. You're all going to go through this. I've been through it. It's horrible. You lose someone, you have to sit there and work out how you want to bury that person. But to be told you can't bury the person you want to, how you want to do that, is the worst thing going. So please, scrap this death tax. I urge you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to that at the end, I think. Next, we have Councillor Mark Goetcher.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a few observations to make about this. First of all, just to echo some of the previous speakers, I would like to know exactly why this very large above inflation increase is being targeted at the costs of the cemetery and cremation, which is, as other speakers have highlighted, probably the most sensitive and emotive area on the list. And it does seem to have been targeted for the biggest increase. And of course, we've gone through the pandemic. And as Councillor Lilly said, we are in a situation where the cost of living is very rapidly rising. Price rises, fuel bill rises, and it just seems very, very insensitive to have targeted this particular area for the biggest increase, and other previous speakers have put that better than I could. Second observation is I'm just wondering why under market street trading, it is the the street traders particularly that are being targeted for the 2.53% increase. I mean, I'm thinking of the traders in Culver Street that I know very well. I see them virtually every day on my walk to work. They don't feel the council supports them very much. They have always got issues to raise. And I just know that this is going to go down very badly because it does look like they're being specifically targeted. So I just wonder what the rationale is behind that. A final observation is that in the larger document, the main document, as in terms of the rationale for these increases, it does talk about COVID and the pandemic and the need to find more money because of this, but it doesn't mention the fact that another reason for this is that the Borough Council's funding has been cut regularly over the last 10 years in terms of the funding it receives from central government. So it does seem like there is a bit of a well, not so much a political agenda, but a bit of whitewashing of some of the reasons why this is happening. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have any other councillors to speak on this. So, Councillor Lissivore, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you to all the councillors that attended tonight and spoke on this item. Of course, it's a very difficult time. It's always a difficult time, but after what's been going on the last 18 months, it's always a difficult time to increase fees. We all realise that. However, there are obviously strains on the council's finances, and for the first time in many, many years, we also have concern over inflation rates. I won't say very much on each particular subject because I will allow the separate cabinet members to make comments on their own portfolios. But just to answer just some of the responses, as I say, we will make sure that written responses go back to the individual councillors. Councillor King mentioned business rate retention. Obviously, that is something that we have been talking about, and the government has been talking about for at least 5 years now. It needs to be sorted, there is no doubt about it. But when we have pandemics such as last year, it does unfortunately get pushed down the agenda. It is something that both at Essex County Council and Colchester Borough Council will take very, very seriously. And we hope that some new work will be done, new announcements will be made very shortly on business rate retention. I was a little bit concerned to say, Councillor Lee said that he wants car parking fees to be increased. That always concerns me because of the knock-on effect that has to our businesses within our town. Obviously, our businesses, particularly the retail businesses, really, really suffered in the last 18 months. And we want to try and keep Colchester as competitive as possible. We want people to come to town and spend their money in our shops. But I will allow the individual cabinet members to respond on their own particular portfolios. But thank you again for attending and thank you for speaking.
Thank you. Councillor Oxford.
Thank you, Leader. In regards to the fees and charges for the cemetery and crematorium, I'm going to admit I have struggled with this myself. And I have asked that the increases that we are proposing be kept as low as possible. And our increases have never been in line with inflation. And I'd like to remind everybody that Chelmsford put up their cemetery and crematorium fees by 28%. Chelmsford are charging a lot more than we are, along with Braintree and other councils. So our increase in comparison is not that much, depending on how you look at it. And our costs for cremation and burials are a small part of a funeral. We work closely with the funeral directors as well, but we are just one part of a funeral. And I'd like to remind councillors that the previous administration wanted to put up the fees and charges by 85% on all costs across the board. That I have definitely said a no to. We are still maintaining free funerals for under 18s, and direct funerals have been capped to ensure that residents will have access to the funds, i.e. a social fund, to make sure that funerals are done in the dignified manner, something which our award-winning cemetery and crematorium are renowned for. In fact, people actually ask to come to Colchester Crematorium because of the sort of service and the dignity we give to the bereaved and the deceased. I will say again, I have struggled with this, and I have insisted that the increase as it is as little as we possibly can make it. But the sad fact of the matter is that there are increased costs involved, And if we want to maintain the excellent service that we do now without having to cut things, unfortunately, I feel we have no alternative. But I would also ask residents to think and plan ahead. What sort of funeral do you want? Can you set up a payment plan so that when the inevitable happens, and in this day and age, you don't know when this is going to happen. We've had COVID that we never thought that we would have. So in this unstable time, to plan ahead and think how you will do this. Can you do a payment plan? Can you sort things out ahead of time so your bereaved are not left, as you say, struggling with how can I do this, how can I do that? If everybody knows exactly what you want and how you want it and how you're going to pay for it. Again, I will stress, I have struggled with this myself, but I feel we have no alternative, because if there was one, I would take it. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Dundas, can I just come in with a point of order, if we can have points of order at Cabinet? I don't know if it's the particular acoustics of this room and people can't appreciate it at home, but we listened very quietly and intently to the questions that were being asked to us. And I would really ask that you respect that when the Cabinet members are speaking as well. You may think you're only mumbling or talking to yourself or perhaps to your colleague next to you, but we can actually hear you really loudly, and it makes it very difficult for us to hear what is going on. So I could just request that please, with other people, respect what we're saying just as much as we've respected what they're saying.
You beat me to it, Councillor Lissimore, because no, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Oxford. Other portfolio holders, is there anything else you wish to add? Yeah, Councillor Crowe.
Thank you. Well, parking revenue obviously suffered enormously thanks to COVID last year and into this year, and that income loss is expected to continue in 22-23 year. And we're keeping almost all parking tariffs where they currently are. There are only a few rises. There's a rise to trader season ticket fees in Mersey. St John Street and Britannia parking offers are rising a little bit. These are offers access on the My Permit app. And Dedham Parish Council requested that we increase the price of parking in 2 of their car parks to put them on a level with other tourist destinations in the area. Highwoods Country Park, we've increased parking for 4 hours by 20 pence. And it is important that we do this because the town is getting back on its feet after a devastating 18 months. And we need it to be a place where people who live here and people who don't live here want to come, and they're not priced out of our car parks and go off to other destinations, other shopping destinations around the area. So I'm pleased to see that we're doing what we're doing with this pricing.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I'll just add to that, as I'm sure Councillor Lilly is aware, we have some talented and sophisticated people in the council who model car parking revenue. And the reality is we are looking to maximise revenue out of car parking. Putting up the price doesn't necessarily increase the revenue. In actual fact, putting up the price can reduce the revenue. So we have looked carefully at the modelling. Well, perhaps you need to do a bit of an economics lesson. I can talk about the Lassiter curve if we really want to get into that, what it was called. But that's the reality. So I think that has been looked at. Unless anything else, anybody wants to say anything else? Do you want to recommend the decision, Councillor Lissimore?
No, just wanted to say to remind any councillors that are here or that are listening that we have the next budget workshop on the 22nd of November. So I'd really implore councillors to attend there. If they feel that they have some constructive ways of helping us as an administration ensure that fees are fair, then please come along to that workshop and you know, tell us what you think. If we're going to cut one thing, if we're going to add to one thing, we've got to cut another thing. So we need to know what you are thinking as councillors and what your alternatives would be. But again, thank you to all the officers that worked hard on this. It's always a difficult one, increasing fees. So I appreciate the work that everyone has done on this. And I recommend to Cabinet that they approve the fees and charges for 22-23 as set out in the appendix of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lismore. I'd endorse that. We always listen. Nothing's final till it's final when the budget's set. So we will always continue to listen. Nobody likes putting up prices. I don't any more than anybody else. But for the time being, I think we'll take that recommendation. Cabinet members, are we in agreement? Yes, we are. Thank you very much. So the next item, I think, what's the time? Oh, we're okay to continue. It's not 7:30 yet. I think we'll press on. It's item 8.3. If we could perhaps hear ourselves, that would be good. It's Local Council Tax Support Scheme 22-23. We have two speakers on this. The first is Councillor Martin Warnes. Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that I raised at the last council meeting my concern about the need to reassess the risk register in items concerning the likelihood of an additional call upon the council tax scheme over and above the pre-pandemic levels, which in the medium-term financial forecast was predicting 12.5% over 4 years, which is a little over 3% every year. Given what I've come here to ask is, given the continued pressures building up within the wider economy on the cost of living, which a number of councillors have raised today. For example, inflation is now standing at a 10-year high, as rising energy bills and food costs, amongst other things, are affecting both families and businesses alike. The Consumer Price Index rose by 4.2% in the last 12 months to October, which is double the Bank of England's forecast. The average petrol price has jumped by an average of 25 pence per litre to £138.60. In Colchester, it is actually higher than that, roughly around 1.43 a litre. The housing press have recently reported a 207% increase in bailiff-enforced evictions by the courts since the pandemic-related ban was lifted. Between July and September this year, there has been 10,202 possession cases issued across England and Wales. So consequently, given the flexibility that each council has over the design of its council tax support scheme, autonomy over whether to revise the council tax scheme, and noting that this report recommends no change, can I ask the portfolio holder for resources if, in considering the review of the council tax scheme, she has considered helping hard-pressed families by matching the Chancellor of the Exchequer's 5 pence in the pound reduction in the universal credit taper by reducing the current council tax taper from 20 pence in the pound down to 15 for those earning over and above the I forget the name for it, but the actual allowances that somebody can earn before the taper and the reduction kicks in. So it's paid in a way that is supporting hard-pressed vulnerable families who are the ones facing the brunt of the cost of living squeeze. And if not, why not?
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. Do you want to come back at the end or? Yeah, okay. Councillor Lissenborough will take all the have your says and then come back at the end. We also have Councillor Mark Corey, who has a statement to be read by the Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Councillor Corey's statement. I welcome that no cuts have been made to the local council tax support scheme for this year and praise the hard work carried out by Jason Granger and the Welfare and Benefits team to support this scheme and many others which help our most vulnerable residents. I did ask at the scrutiny panel, and I would reiterate again, about the rising cost of living for many on lower incomes, compounded by universal credit cuts and future national insurance increases, and ask what analysis are we continuing to do of the cohort receiving local council tax support, and does the portfolio holder or officers believe we may need to make the scheme more generous in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, and I think that concludes the have your say. So, Councillor Lissenborough.
Thank you very much. Thank you again to the councillors for attending and for giving their speeches in. Thank you very much. The local council tax support scheme currently helps 9,500 residents, helps them reduce their council tax bill. And this is very important. We are pleased to be able to continue it as it is. But to give a quick response really to both Councillor Warnes and Councillor Corey, and to reiterate again what I said of the earlier item, please come to the budget workshop and contribute and tell us what, if you want this to be increased, what else you would like to cut to pay for that increase. As I've said in the previous item, we haven't really had an inflation problem for many, many years. We now have to seriously take that into consideration with absolutely everything that this council is doing. In response to Councillor Corey, this scheme is actually one of the most generous in the whole of the area. If you look at those certainly neighbouring us and even extending out into the east of England, we are one of the most generous. And what I really was proud about this scheme was the way the officers spoke about it. It was great to hear from them the stories of how this had helped people, how they were at their wits' end and didn't know what they were going to do. And this was sort of like the final straw for them. So to be able to come to the council, ask for help and be given that help was a huge boost to them, especially during what we've gone through in the last 18 months. So again, all I can do is implore at the moment for all councillors to attend that, as many councillors as possible to attend that budget workshop next week. And I recommend that Cabinet refers the local council tax support scheme as described in 2.1 onto full council for approval and adoption. And I look forward to it being heard at full council and to members' contributions there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lissenborough. I'll just reiterate that for clarity, our LCTS is definitely at the more generous end of the spectrum. And I think we've taken the very deliberate and conscious decision to maintain it at that in light of many pressures which residents are feeling at the moment. I'll also add, of course, Councillor Warnes mentioned that the CPI is at 4.2%, being no doubt that applies to the council as well. The cost of running our services is going up by similar amounts, and we need and want to maintain the services which our residents depend on. But do not kid yourself that we are under pressure, and anybody would be under pressure in terms of ensuring that we have the revenue to provide that. So there are no easy answers on that score. With that said, just find the recommendation. It is recommended that the current working age entitlement is maintained for the fiscal year effective from 1st of April 2022. The only amendments from the current scheme being the prescribed regulations and mandated national legislative amendments. And 2.2, Cabinet refers the local council tax support scheme as described in 2.1 onto full council for approval and adoption. So councillors, you will have your chance to vote on it, and hopefully it being a generous scheme, I would hope you support it. But Cabinet members, are we okay with that? We are, thank you, that is agreed. And last one, Councillor Lissimore, you had a busy evening tonight. Is 8.4, Officer Pay Policy Statement 2223, for which we have 17. Oh no, we don't. We have none. We have no councillors speaking. So we'll move straight to the item.
Thank you. Again, big thanks to officers for all the work that they've done on this. It is as read, and I recommend that Cabinet refers the adoption of the 2022-23 Pay Policy Statement to full council for approval.
Well, I'm happy to do that. Councillors, are we in agreement? Yep, nobody wish, yep, okay. That is agreed. Section 9 is environment and sustainability. Let me just banging his microphone. Do we have any speakers on this item? Future parking partnerships, we don't. So Councillor Crowe, I believe you're introducing this one.
Okay, thank you. So firstly, I'd like to thank officers for the work they've done on this and say a little bit about NEP, which is a national leader in parking operations and enforcement and innovation. And in fact, so much so that many other local authorities consult us for best practice advice. And the evidence of this is that we've won 8 national awards in the last 3 years. Now, the current joint committee agreement between Essex County Council and the Parking Partnership is approaching the end of its term. So from March the 31st next year, we're going to need to agree the future of on-street parking management in Essex. NEP has been operating successfully for 11 years, and during this time, Colchester has been the lead authority for the on-street operational service, and NEP also provides off-street car parking operational services to Colchester with varying depths of service to Braintree, Uttlesford and Harlow under a shared services agreement. The proposed new agreement will see existing arrangements continue with potential to add additional shared services, but with a different approach to the way surplus amounts are allocated. And this has been the focus of a new heads of terms document for a future on-street agreement. Now, membership of the Parking Partnership puts Colchester on the top table and enables us to have a say in traffic orders which are installed within our area and to direct the policy of the operational services. A proper control of on and off street parking has a very big influence over traffic control, and to be able to help shape parking policy is strategically important to help meet the council's aims around travel choices into the town. A new 5-year term is being offered by the county council with the options of 3 further 1-year extensions totaling an 8-year term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Any further comments on that? No. In that case, I think we'll move straight to the recommendation. Councillors, do we accept the recommendation as laid out? We do. Okay, that is done. And we move on to item 9.2, which Councillor Oxford is going to deal with, but we do have 2 speakers on this. Shall we take the speakers and then, or would you prefer? Yeah, we have Councillor Martin Warnes first. Councillor Warnes, been doing a lot of walking this evening.
Thank you, Chair. I've come to ask what reassurance the portfolio holder for street care can give to my residents that this policy is not a front for actually reducing the provision of litter bins in residential areas rather than an attempt to address fly tipping. The feedback I'm getting is that one of the main problems is that the bins are not being emptied regularly enough. There are also concerns that the staff normally scheduled to empty bins are instead being diverted to other duties within the town centre, leaving bins within the wider area and wards like mine in Bearchurch uncollected rather than necessarily being fly tipped.
Thank you. Councillor, would you like to pick that up on the main item, or would you like to do it now? It's entirely up to you.
I can do it now if you like.
Okay.
The reason for this bin policy is to ensure that this is definitely not a cut to provision of bins, rather than that bins are where they should be and they are managed properly. I do not know of any wardens being diverted to do the town centre when they should be emptying bins on wards. If I have a problem with the bins on my ward, which I have had because people have been putting weird and wonderful things in that they shouldn't be, I contact the neighbourhood priority team straight away, and they come and sort it out. So I haven't had any feedback about people saying that wardens or the neighbourhood priority teams are being diverted to the town centre. I'm sorry, that's something I haven't had. So if you can give me some more information or some evidence of it, I can take that back and look at it for you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Councillor Laws is also going to contribute.
I just wanted to comment about bins. In that I saw this policy as a really good opportunity, actually, to talk about design and what we wanted bins in certain places to look like. So I've really welcomed the opportunity to have that in black and white. And also, I think it's worth considering in the realm that actually, because of what's happened in the last 18 months or so, obviously people's habits have been a bit different, and there's been more people at home, more people perhaps not going into offices where they would maybe ordinarily dump waste. And I think, you know, it's worth bearing in mind that for our officers and the frontline staff, that there has been some changes that may have been resulting in bins in different places performing and handling rubbish in a different way. And as far as I can tell, people are responding to those challenges really well. But I think we have to be mindful of what we've been going through in the last couple of years. It is relevant in the context.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. And we have one more speaker on this item who I think is joining us remotely, unless he's got here very, very quickly. Which is Councillor Dave Harris.
Thank you, Leader. I hope you can still hear me okay.
Yes, just about, yes.
Very much. Yes, I wish to associate myself with the remarks of Councillor Warnes. He's quite correct. Signage has appeared on our bins in our area, reminding residents that about the need not to fly tip beside bins. And that is a worry, not just for our three councillors, Councillor Pearson, Warnes and myself, but for some of the residents who have seen it. So he's quite right. He's also quite right. And so Beverly Oxford knows, and I would absolutely respect what she just said. She needs to know, and I will sort of certainly tell her, and I'll follow that with an email. Some of the zone team are taken away from wards and taken into the market stall administration in the town centre quite regularly, and that leaves our bins unemptied. And we, that's our three councillors, and I'm sure other councillors as well, are sending pictures. And to his credit, the zone managers asked for those pictures to be sent of overflowing bins so he can address the situation. Now, I want to say, Leader, a few things about the litter warriors. And I'm sure you want to associate yourself with this because all of us councillors respect and encourage litter warrior scheme. And I believe that many people across Colchester, and we're no different. In fact, Councillor Pearson, Warnes and myself are litter warriors ourselves. Councillor Warnes didn't mention that because he's too modest, but we go out most weekends picking up litter as litter warriors, leading others. Now, we tend to leave those bags of rubbish, Leader, beside the bins, because that's what we've been told to do. And we think we should not discourage that, because it's better having a bag of collected litter beside the bin than scattered over the streets on a wider area and making our communities look downtrodden and uncared for. So I think it saves officer time in not litter picking and letting the litter warriors do it and leaving the bags of rubbish there. So I think that ought to be perhaps a paragraph in there in this policy about that, just to make sure that we praise the litter warriors and the work that they do and put in place a system of reporting to the zone team and to us as a council that that's been picked up to save officer time. Now, again, just a few positive things about what the portfolio holder said. Correct. I think absolutely consultation with the ward councillors and residents, as she says, should happen. And by the sound of it, it's going to happen, which I think is great. Ward councillors, let's face it, if they propose a bin leader, it will be on behalf of residents, won't it? I have a junction at Secundus Way and Gurdon Road where it's been a hot spot for litter because it's near the cemetery extension that you may or may not know was extended some while ago. So obviously incurs extra litter because over time, because it's people going to and from the graveyard, to and from schools, and the residents have asked for a bin. I put that request in and that needs to be done, and I need the form because this policy says there's got a form to be filled in. But the document here doesn't say that locality grants can be used to pay for these bins, because I believe it should. Essex County Council I've contacted today, some senior people in Essex County Council, they've said yes, absolutely, as long as no revenue cost, then we can use an Essex County Council, and I'm sure a Borough Council locality grant can be used to pay for a bin in a proper place in negotiation with the zone team and the residents. And as long as it's on its existing round, isn't it, like a round that's already been picked up, then it's no extra cost to the council. So I think that reduction of bins shouldn't happen unless there's absolutely dire need for it. The one thing I would support, Leader, and I think you probably would agree with me, I'm hoping, that the introduction and the praise of, as Councillor Laws has said, the multi-purpose bins where you can put dog, mess in and litter in the same bins are much better than having these red dog poo bins and separate litter bins, because there's less cost for us to go around and empty 2 bins if we just empty 1. So a few positives there, a few pleas from me, but the important thing for me, I think, to realise is there's a process here. Please amend it if you can to fine tune it with the words that I've said, but don't use it as an excuse to cut bins. We'll work with you as ward councillors, I'm sure, across the whole of Colchester. And I praise finally, again, just to repeat, the work of the litter warriors across the whole of Colchester. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I certainly endorse the comments and the support of the litter warriors and many other comments made there. But I think Councillor Crowe wants to come in briefly, and then we'll go to Councillor Oxford for the main item.
Yes, thank you. I will be brief. There is crossover with our portfolios with Councillor Oxford and myself, but so I thought I'd quickly speak because obviously I get portfolio holder briefings on the subject, and I wanted to reassure Councillor Warnes that there is no cloak and dagger operation to remove bins by stealth. Our officers are in fact working very hard to try and improve our efficiencies in deploying our resources to get the bins emptied. And regarding fly tipping, which has been mentioned a couple of times this evening, to my way of thinking, we must continue with trying to educate those who are unaware that they're fly tipping when they shove a black bag in a bin, or they leave their black bag next to the bin, or other rubbish. Some people don't realise they're fly tipping. They think it's a bin, I can leave my rubbish there. We need to keep educating them, and we need to keep trying to scare through social media and everything else people who do know they shouldn't be fly tipping. And when we catch them, we need punitive fines so that hopefully they won't do it again, and others will see that and maybe won't do it as well. So.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I'll now go to Councillor Oxford, who's been very patient.
Thank you, Leader. Right, litter bin policy. Before I do my little preamble, I want to reiterate again, this is not a cut to litter bins. We are not looking to remove litter bins or take them away or anything like that. So this is not a cut to the provision of litter bins. We have never had a litter bin policy that sets out our aims and our objectives as regards to litter bins. And as Councillor Crowe says, it's a crossover between ourselves, and we're working hard to come up with policies, to come up with aims and objectives that will help everybody in the borough. And I would like to thank the work of the policy panel. I'd like to thank the work of the officers in putting this litter bin policy together, as it's something we have never had. Now, it needs to be said that we don't actually have a legal duty to supply litter bins. Our duty is to keep the public highways clear of litter and refuse. And believe it or not, we have in the region of 1,800 litter bins across the whole borough. Who'd have thought we'd had that many? This policy is to ensure the bins are managed, maintained, and emptied in an appropriate manner. It will also ensure that litter bins are in the right place and they are used correctly. As we have said before, there has been a litter bin that was there. It was used as a fly tipping. We took the bin away. The fly tipping stopped. We put the bin back and the fly tipping started all over again. I do think people know exactly what they're doing. They know they're fly tipping and they think they can get away with it. And I would like to see, if possible, a lot more fixed penalty notices, if we can do it, to stop people from doing this, because they are affecting everybody. I'd also like, as Councillor Harris said, to sing the praises of litter warriors. Where would we be without them? Our litter warriors have a different colour bag. So when they do their litter picking, they put it next to the bin so that then the wardens know that this is not a fly tip. This is the litter warriors doing their bit. I don't know if Councillor Harris has that in his ward. I'm not really sure. We're also auditing litter bins to find out exactly where they are, what sort of bins they are they up to the job? So then we get a clearer picture of what is also going on with litter bins. Not all litter bins are the same. Some are large, some are small, and we need to know what sort of bins we have and where they are. And also, Cabinet is investing in a lot new equipment and technology. Who would have ever thought that you could actually now have a bin that can tell you that it's full, and could you come and empty me? What a wonderful thing that is. And we're looking to trial that as a way of seeing if that helps us in our endeavours. Oopsie daisy. All right. And again, I will say again, this is not a policy to cut or reduce the provision of litter bins. But there might need to have changes if fly tipping keeps on. I don't mean to take them away completely. Perhaps if they were gone for a while and then brought back again, that may solve the situation. But I can assure councillors that no bins will be removed without consultation with the community, with ward councillors and parish councillors, to make sure that this is the best thing for their wards. I think we've been a little bit overzealous at times, and all of a sudden a bin has gone away and nobody seems to know why. But I have ensured that this won't happen again. I feel this is policy something that we should all be proud of and get behind of, and I would recommend this report to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. In fact, it was so good, I think somebody led off some fireworks during it outside. So well done. What I would just add to that, as you said at the beginning, this comes out of the policy panel. We were criticised, I think, earlier in the year for perhaps not giving the policy panel enough work or always listening to them. Well, this has gone through the policy panel. They've developed it. It is opposition chaired. And we as a cabinet have accepted its recommendation in full without alteration. Therefore, I would expect that we will see wide support for this across the council. I see no reason why not. So I think our job is to accept the recommendation. Just check. Yes, it is. Cabinet members, are we agreed to accept this? We are. Thank you. Shall we carry on? I think so. I don't see any desire to stop now. Item 10.1, which is graffiti policy review. We have one.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. You have an item of a minute from the policy panel on page 211, where they are requesting that you give approval for them to consider the draft Essex County Council litter strategy. Perhaps you'd care to deal with that.
Let me just get to page 200. Cabinet members, have we got any comments on this? Thoughts? Are we relaxed about doing so? I think we can take that as an approval to agreed. So thank you for pointing that out. I've lost it down there on page 211. I've moved onto page 213 now. Item 10I, graffiti policy review. We have one speaker on this, Councillor Martin Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Cabinet members, whilst I welcome the idea of a dedicated graffiti can be celebrated. Portfolio holder for street care, tell me if she would consider alongside that a zero tolerance policy elsewhere. Because tagged street furniture is a continual plague within the ward that I represent, many of it which has little artistic value. I spend a great deal of my time noting and requesting the removal of such unsightly tags. And therefore, if you would consider a zero tolerance policy beyond designated tolerated areas, would you also consider providing adequate resource in order that that might be enforced? Because as long as I've been a councillor, graffiti tags appear, we get them cleaned off, they reappear, and it's like a war of attrition that goes on between those that want to stop the ward looking unsightly and those that feel that they can tag their domain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warnes. Councillor Oxford, we'll go over to you to introduce it and answer any points.
Thank you. Yes, we already do operate a zero tolerance policy. And with these stupid little squiggles, these silly taggy things, the police or the wardens will take pictures of them and they build up a database so that then they can identify who these people are, because they're that daft, they use the same tag over and over again so they can get caught. So that is what we are doing, and I agree with you, there should be a zero tolerance of this mindless act that people do, that they seem to think a funny little squiggle is somehow a work of art, which it isn't. It just makes a place look dirty and filthy and uncared for, and then that leads to more problems. So yes, I agree with you completely. Right, to introduce the policy, I'm not going to say too much because it's here in the report, but I would just again like to thank the policy panel for their work. And this policy was last reviewed in 2011. And so the policy panel have made amendments to this review. And I am now quite pleased to say that we have what you could call a definition of what is graffiti, which to me is the silly squiggles on the utility boxes that mean nothing to anybody and should be gone. But also there's a thing coming up now called street art. And I feel street art can actually enhance an area if it's done in the right way and the right location. It can actually benefit the area as it livens it up. Sometimes it makes it look cared for, and some people actually do enjoy it. Obviously, other people think it shouldn't be there anyway. But in my view, there can be a definition now between what is street art that is done carefully and properly and with thought, and what is a stupid little squiggle that shouldn't be there in the first place. And I would like to recommend this report to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. So our decision, which is on page 213, is to that the graffiti policy is approved and applied subject to the following changes. I won't read them all out. There's A, B, C, D as listed. Cabinet members, councillors, are we in agreement? We are agreed. Thank you very much. Okay. And the item we've all been waiting for, which we don't have any speakers on, is, but it is important, is 10.2 Unmanned Aerial Vehicle and Drone Policy Review, which is Councillor Oxford again.
Yay! Lucky me. Whoops. Oh. Right. The drone report sets out the changes to the legislation, but it also formalises our approach to the use of drones on council land. This has also been reviewed by the policy panel, and I would just like to recommend this report to Cabinet. There's not really an awful lot to say about drones.
No, I could make a probably terrible joke, but I won't at this time of night. I've made enough tonight. Councillors, are we agreed? We are. Thank you very much. Okay. So we move on to item 11, which is general, which is nomination for Deputy Mayor 22-23. As I understand it, we've only received one proposed nomination, which is Councillor John Jowers. The monitoring officer is nodding.
That's correct, Leader, yes.
I've had indications from all groups that they support that. Cabinet, without further ado, are we agreed to make that recommendation to council? We are. Okay. Excellent. And 11.2 is calendar of meetings 22-23. The draft calendar is actually in your agenda pack on page sort of 240-ish onwards, 241 onwards. Has anybody got any comments they wish to make on that, or are we agreed to accept it for the time being? Agreed? Okay, that is agreed. I think that's all we need to do. And item 11.3 is progress or responses to the public, which is on page 237. Yeah, it's actually on a different page, but there we go. It's actually on page 245 on my pack. I don't think I've got any particular comments in there. As far as I can see, we have responded to all questions from the public. Has anybody got any comments, or are we okay to note that we've seen that? Yep, we're okay to note that we've seen that. And without further ado, I need to move a motion, which is in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972 and in accordance with the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012 to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting so that any items containing exempt information, for example, personal, financial, or legal advice in part B of this agenda, it's not printed on yellow paper, but it would be in the old days, can be decided. Exempt information is defined in section 100I and schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Councillors, are we agreed? In which case,